Hi there, this is Dr. Peter Castor, better known as Peter. I'm your professor in any number of classes right now: English 101 online, English 101 face-to-face, Film 240, Introduction to Film online, and Film Directors, Film 360, focusing on Spike Lee's work. The purpose of this podcast is to, for all of my students, identify what I consider criteria for successful writing in an academic environment, and by extension, many professional environments as well. So we're going to begin with, I used to think there was no such thing as good writing overall. It was defined by the genre and purpose. But then it occurred to me that there might be some more specific criteria that might spread across a variety of genres of writing. So to begin, in most instances, and this sounds silly, you probably need a title. This title should not be Scene Description and Analysis or Research Paper, because recognize that's the title of everybody's assignment in the class. So we'll work later on our next assignment on how to have a title that's more meaningful and matches with professional expectations. Next up, you want to, as quickly as possible, if you're writing a summary and analysis, you want to identify what text you are summarizing and analyzing, which means you need to, as quickly as possible, indicate the author, the title. That title should be in quotes, and parenthetically indicate the year of publication, as well as the publication context, which is to say, where did this article first appear? Next up, fundamental to all forms of writing, you want to be clear. I know that in high school you could get away with basically using big words to try to sound smart, and as long as you used them well, then that probably meant you were smart enough and the teacher could move on to the next student who probably needed a lot more help. However, while big words can be very valuable, indeed, transubjectivity is a really useful word because it would take about 4 sentences to explain what that word means. However, focus on trying to be clear. At the same time, demonstrate the ability to manage complexity. So it's easy to be clear using very short, simple sentences. I am writing about a movie. The movie was directed by Spike Lee. The movie is Do the Right Thing. The movie was released in 1989. Recognize, while that is clear, it also sounds like you're writing to a first grader. So instead, Spike Lee's critically acclaimed film Do the Right Thing, open parentheses 1989, initiated a series of national conversations regarding racial justice in the United States, a conversation that persists to this day, period. So that sentence is still clear, but it demonstrates the ability to manage complexity. Now recognize, as you make your sentences more complicated in their structure yet still clear, you will introduce sentence level errors, misplaced commas, some grammatical challenges. That's okay. That's what revision's for, to fix that. Next up, you want your writing to be concise. If I'm writing a shopping list, I don't write, well, when I go to Ingles today, I need to make sure that I go to the produce section and get some potatoes, probably, if I can, Yukon Golds, because they have a softer, creamier texture in mashed potatoes. Then I need to make sure I get organic carrots, period. No, period. That's not what you do. You write on a list for shopping, Yukon Golds, carrots. That's concise for the purpose of the assignment. However, if you're writing about, say, an article written by Sarah Spain, published on ESPN.com, a story of a young man who inadvertently discovers that after being adopted and never knowing his birth father, upon discovering his birth father, that man had been his mentor and coach when he was a teenager, period. Well, if our summary of the article is just that one sentence, it's insufficient. So while we need to be concise, we also need to be complete. We need to provide all the necessary information in order to make our writing functional. Next up, we always need to be correct. Now, in any writing class, or writing in the context of having your writing be graded, you first off might think of sentence level correctness, getting the commas in the right place. And while that is important, it's not nearly as important as other factors. Of utmost importance is factual correctness. We live in an era of fake news, but while everybody is entitled to their own opinion, you are not entitled to your own facts. So factual accuracy is key. You also need to match constraints. If you have a paper that is supposed to be 5 pages double-spaced, 2 pages double-spaced is going to get an F. It's insufficient to the task. 10 pages double-spaced is going to be frustrating for the folks grading it, and it's going to unbalance the grading in the other students' work who've met the constraint of 5 pages. This is meaningful for you in particular because if you're typing in an online environment, say you're applying for a scholarship, well, that dialog box in which you're typing may have a 4,000 character limit. If you're describing your background in scholarly work and service, which would merit you the scholarship, and you hit the end of the 4,000 character limit, and you've only gone from high school to your first year in college, for many of you that will leave out much of your significant accomplishments. And so you'll have to be more concise in order to include all of the information. So operate within the constraints of the assignment. In my classes, those constraints are always listed in the assignment itself. Next up, constraints of genre. If you're writing a summary and analysis of an article, well, your job is to summarize and then analyze it. If you're doing other things, then you're not following the assignment. If you fail to include textual evidence in the form of quotes, you're also not following the assignment. I encourage virtually all of my students in their formal writing to have their paragraphs be 1/2 page to a full page double-spaced and feature at least 1 to 3 quotes in each paragraph. Those quotes need to be incorporated correctly. For my classes, that means following MLA style. For my 101 students, there is ample information regarding incorporating quotes in MLA style in our syllabus. For my 200 and 300 level students, I have not incorporated that information in my syllabus. However, you can easily Google MLA style, and it will indicate how to incorporate quotes, and less importantly, how to cite those sources at the end of your paper. So these matters are, I think, necessary for you to think about in all of your formal writing, especially in my classes. Next up, you want to be sure to read the assignments very carefully. Most of the questions you may have about your work on an assignment often are answered in the assignment itself. For example, one of the ways in which students in my film classes often have their grade less than they thought it should be, well, it's because one of the instructions is to quote from our textbook meaningfully and mention another film from our class. That's easy to fix, but it's also easy to overlook. So be sure to read, regardless of the assignment, the instructions very carefully. Also, recognize that summary should be an account of the article that's fair. That means that you should be able to read your summary, including its quotes, to the author, and they should nod and say, yes, that's exactly what I meant. Analysis, however, needs to be something different. In analysis, you need to bring something to the text that's not already there. So, for example, if you're writing about an essay on privilege, published in Cracked.com, written by David Wong, your analysis might point out, with a little bit of research, that David Wong is the pseudonym of, I'm forgetting his actual name, so don't worry about it, but he's basically a generic white dude. So while it's awesome that he's writing about privilege and explaining how privilege operates in our country, notably white male privilege, well, an analysis might point out that while now Wong includes his real name and I think he might include a graphic of his face, we could criticize how it took so long for him to recognize the degree to which he was appropriating what most would consider a Chinese last name. Or, if you're writing a scene description and analysis of, I don't know, the "Draw Me Like Your French Girls" scene in the Titanic, it might be interesting to point out in your analysis that the film earned a PG-13 rating because while it does feature partial nudity, it's in the context of the production of art. When, however, the two main characters have sex inside a car on the ship, there is no nudity, with the presumption being nudity framed in an aesthetic context can be appropriate for a PG-13 rating, while nudity in the context of a sex scene is not. And that PG-13 rating was absolutely crucial for Cameron to have any shot at making a profit on what was then the most expensive film made of all time. That PG-13 rating allowed more people to see the movie to the extent that in 1997 it became the highest grossing film of all time to date, not adjusted for inflation. Anyway, I hope this podcast helps. You can expect more of them, and indeed more of them tailored to our specific classes, but I thought that this one, addressing principles of good writing, might be valuable for everybody. In addition, for those of you who are not in my English 101 classes, you might Google Andrea Lunsford, Lunsford, 20 common errors. You'll see many sites that indicate empirical data demonstrating that there are 20 errors college writing students often make. They're ranked from 1 to 20. They give you examples of the error and indicate how to fix it. That can be very valuable. While I have you submit drafts online for my online students and in class for face-to-face students, I can't comb through your papers and identify every single sentence level error. I can, however, indicate trends. We don't make errors like this indiscriminately, but most of us make 3 or 4 consistently. Our job is to figure out which ones we make consistently and fix them. Anyway, I know it's a tough semester. In the face-to-face classes, wearing masks is weird. It's hard to learn your names. I'm always reminded of The Dark Knight Rises in my face-to-face classes. You came into darkness. I was born in it, molded by it. So I just feel like calling all of you Bane. For my online classes, we don't get that synchronic interaction unless you call. And so I would really appreciate your call. I was able to field a conversation with one of you last night, and it would have taken like 4 days of email in a back and forth to resolve the issues. But I think we were able to do so successfully by phone. Also, I didn't get into this business to email people and build websites. So those of you who are participating in the class discussions online on the shared Google Doc, fantastic. I'll send out a podcast every week or two responding to these, answering your questions, and offering additional kind of course information that extends beyond our book. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up here. I'm going to post it to Blackboard. If possible, perhaps not for this podcast, but for future ones, I will upload it as a YouTube clip, because that way closed captioning will be available. Some of you may have auditory challenges or may just appreciate being able to read the text as you listen to it. So that's going to require me getting some additional software, so it may be a week before that happens. Anyway, this is a troubled time. If you're able to compartmentalize and ignore some really terrifying events that are happening in our nation in lots of ways, then good for you. If you're crushed by it and paralyzed by it and personally affected by these tremendous pressures, then that's okay. Get some rest. I'm going to be really lenient on due dates up until October 7th, because mid-semester grades are due to the university that week, and I need to have a cogent sense of the data. But what I mean is, if you're turning something in a day or two late, a week late, 2 weeks late, until that point, I don't care. Just try to catch up. I'm going to be really lenient with you guys for at least the first half of the semester and probably the whole semester, because we've been cursed to live in interesting times.